Good morning. And thank you, Matt, for taking on Spirit in the Sky and the congregation for struggling through it. It was our first time, okay, you know? The title of this song means exactly what it says. That I have no idea what eternity is, or even if it is. There's absolutely continuity. I know that because people die and reality still exists. But after my death, will I still be part of reality? This talk is going to be full of artful speculation on the matter or channeled wisdom, you decide. Awareness progresses to self-awareness, which progresses to awareness of mortality. Some believe that all of our ideas about what happens after death are simply our means of coping with our mortality. Maybe so. But I believe awareness of continuation is just the next phase of progress in our awareness. Evermore, everlasting, forever after. These are expressions of our lofty desire to continue as individual units of consciousness. We may imagine popping into another realm of reality like heaven, perhaps being surrounded by loved ones that have gone before us. But how often do we believe something simply because it's what we want to believe, simply to cope with our mortality? I'm going to return to the surrounded by loved ones idea at the end with a happy thought about it. So put down your tomatoes and beer bottles. There'll be no throwing of objects at the speaker. I believe that things I have noticed, experienced, and reasoned provide some insight regarding eternity. I also believe these insights could just be me imagining eternity. Abstract extrapolations, as it were. There are days when I feel like an abstract extrapolation. And that may be closer to the truth than when I feel like a personified being of some significance. At the age of 25, I had an out-of-body experience. It happened after my first marriage had collapsed. I was living alone and beginning to explore the idea that reality was deeper than my 5 sensory perceptions. I was reading things like Jonathan Livingston Seagull, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and Carlos Castaneda's works. I had experienced the nuanced reality of psychotropic drugs, though not on or near the time of my out-of-body experience. In fact, I was walking a quite narrow path in that regard at that time. I had come home from work and done my physical workout routine. It was early evening in the summer in San Jose, California. I'd had dinner and was feeling tired. The TV was on and the front door was open to cool the place. I went from sitting to lying on the couch as I watched whatever was on TV. I fell asleep. I woke sometime later and it had gotten dark. The room was lit by the TV and nearby street lights shining through the front door. I decided to call it a night, but needed to shut the door and turn off the TV before going to bed. I stood up, and as I walked toward the door, I felt the oddest sensation I had ever experienced. I felt my body not as a singular mass, but as billions of particles of energy darting around within the shape of my body. It was the most pleasurable thing I had ever experienced by far, and I had played with some pretty euphoric drugs. When I reached the front door, I extended my hand to push it closed, but instead my hand went through the door. Reasoning was not the same in this state, or I would have stopped there to contemplate the situation. Instead, I remember thinking that if I couldn't shut the door, I would at least turn off the TV. I moved to the TV and reached to turn it off, only to have my hand go into the TV. In that instant, I knew I was experiencing what I had read about and heard about from others who had had the same experience. I knew I was out of my body. I turned and looked back at the couch I'd been laying on to find that I still was, and sleeping quite peacefully. This startled me, and in a very reflexive way, I snapped back into my body and simultaneously woke from my sleep. I sat up, fully aware of what had just happened. In those few brief moments, the idea of consciousness requiring a physical body was challenged, if not eliminated. There are thousands of things that were once beyond scientific explanation, but have been explained scientifically. Not that a scientific explanation makes anything less magical. And there is the theory that science will eventually solve all mysteries, given enough time. But that's not unlike saying that if I keep working out, given enough time, I'll be able to bench press a house. Science is very useful, but the minutia of physical reality is also a place where our consciousness loses sight of reality's depth. We come to think that examining reality right down to its molecular structures is depth. But that's just a more detailed examination of physical reality. Imagine we're examining an object sitting on a table in the middle of a room. We back away to get a spatial perspective. We move in close for more detail. We walk around the table to see the object from different angles. We become so entranced with the physical aspects of this object that we forget there's a world out there beyond the room we're in. Physical reality is that room. And spiritual reality is the world, the depth beyond that room. Spiritual reality's vastness is scary. Its ability to defy concrete explanation is daunting. Spiritual reality is full of things we can't know because they are beyond our need to know. And this frustrates our ego into a state of hissy fit. In response, our fearful and fragile ego tells us reality has no depth beyond its physicality. We might substitute the word meaning for the word depth. Science avoids the why question, except when describing the interactions or cause and effect of physical phenomena. There's no why in science because there isn't supposed to be a reason for things to exist. They just do, and it doesn't mean anything. What's interesting is that science doesn't see that as a leap of faith. Consciousness and mystery are the two energy fields from which everything else came to be. Their mating was the cosmic orgasm that started the whole thing off. Neither is going anywhere. Consciousness is not eliminated by death any more than mystery is eliminated by science. Eternity, then, is nothing more than the persistent existence of the energies of consciousness and mystery. Are we eternal beings? If you know my philosophy, then you know that part of it has to do with relativity versus absolutism. Very little of our objective five-sensory perception is absolute, though we experience it as such. We see a still and lifeless apple on the table, but if we look at it through the lens of an instrument that can show us the apple on a particle level, we see protons and electrons doing a dance. Is the apple still? Yes and no. It's relatively still, but not absolutely. Most yes or no type questions are most accurately answered with yes and no, relative, not absolute. So when you ask, are we eternal beings? My answer is yes and no. I'll explain in a bit. In some wisdom traditions, reality is a two-step process. You are born into existence as a human, and you die, and your humanness goes to heaven. If that's the case, heaven would be a place of bodies and personalities. This could be exactly how it is. It's just not what shows up in my meditative sessions, or you could say imagination sessions. It isn't what shows up in my consciousness. We can create a heaven right here on earth, but this is only in relation to how we personally experience reality. If we're experiencing well, we can share with others how we're doing it, but how others experience reality is not our work. Our inhibited imaginations, fearful egos, and limited perceptions like to create the simplest reality we can, which is a heaven and earth duality. The good versus evil simplicity. Often is scripture describing the world as evil. John 2:15, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. I say love everything for the teacher that everything is. I believe in reincarnation, but the whys and wherefores of that belief are a different talk. Reincarnation does provide us with a place from which to imagine eternity. Or if you are here and you don't precisely remember being here before, what does that say about what is eternal? We're back to the yes and no of eternity. Yes, because some aspects of us are transcendent, and no, because other parts are not. Our personality is not transcendent, as it is merely our adaptation to a particular incarnation. Our individual consciousness, the seat of our gathered wisdom, is transcendent because it's what we're building through the course of multiple incarnations. Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, refers to the genetic code that instructs our physicality. Codes symbolize reality for the purpose of replication. A code is information that is put somewhere so that it can be retrieved and utilized. A human has to install the code in a computer for it to work. Who does an atheist believe installed that code in our DNA? I talk to atheists. I love them too. Some are very kind and helpful. And I love that that challenges the religious notion that you can't have those qualities without a belief in God. Atheists have asked me why an advanced being like God doesn't contact us more directly. I answer with another question. How can anything that you don't believe exists contact you? We might need to think more broadly about what contact means. We might need to refine our ability to perceive spiritually to make contact possible. Isn't that at least one thing that meditation is about? Refined perception is part of our SDNA, or spiritual DNA. SDNA is code that we write onto the blackboard of our eternal self. Every time we learn and integrate a piece of spiritual wisdom into our incarnation, and by integrate, I mean that we use the wisdom to adjust how we are in the world, and it becomes part of our SDNA. This part is what carries on, traveling with us to our next incarnation. When we're in heaven, I've imagined, and planning our next trip down to that precarious world of life on earth, our next incarnation, we look at what we have learned. We look at our SDNA and then pick a new set of challenges that will likely add to the SDNA we've already acquired. While in heaven, we look at our past life objectively, free from the confines of the personality we had. Once we've picked a new incarnation situation, a veil is applied. We no longer have a need to know about our past life. But you think, I want to meet those loved ones who have gone before me when I'm in the afterlife. You will, briefly, I imagine, if only a representation of their consciousness. They show up to assist with the transformation from level 1 earth to level 2 heaven. We may also meet them, I imagine, in a future incarnation. We may experience it as feeling like we've known the person we just met forever. And maybe we have. At least that's how I imagine eternity. Namaste.